Welcome to the Life as an Observer podcast. My name is Ryan Bean. I am your host in self-observation. This podcast is an exploration of physical and non-physical self through discussion around yoga, meditation, self-improvement, self-realization, and practices that elevate the mind-body-soul connection. Let's start observing. This episode of Life as an Observer is made possible by patron support. If you'd like to support this program, you can visit patron.podbean.com/lifeasanobserver to learn more. Welcome to Life as an Observer. I'm excited to be back. I had teased this episode on my Instagram, and I think I'd just been sort of sitting with it before I decided to offer this as a podcast. So today's topic is kind of an interesting one. It's one that I've actually had to sit with for quite a while, and it's regarding deep intimacy with our own life experience. Sometimes just called acceptance. And I want to begin today's podcast kind of in a little different way. But first of all, those who are patrons, just really grateful for you guys, those who are supporting this ad-free podcast. I designed it in that way. Now, there's a lot of products that I like, and it's not that I wouldn't have ads if it was something that I believed in, but for the most part, I really just wanted to make this ad free. So offering a patron option has been a really beautiful experience for me, and ways to getting to know some of the patrons, being able to offer different content and longer content and so forth. But you can find that at patron.podbean.com /life as an observer. I'll put a link down in the show notes, but consider joining the patrons. I offer individual breathwork courses on there, some additional content. Sometimes I just record some of the live classes that I teach and then offer those. Waiting for a few more patrons to join the page, and then we'll start offering monthly. Just patron only, we'll call them live casts. I know that Podbean has an option on there, or we could do it on Zoom or some other platforms. But anyway, really interested to do that. Take a look at it. I'll put the link down in the show notes if you're at all interested in kind of going deeper with your spiritual practice. Like I said, this podcast is really about being an observer. As I sit here in my studio, I have my altar sitting next to me and a couple statues of Buddha, and I have a candle burning and some sage burning and all these different crystals and all these different tools that help me observe maybe my current environment. But once you pick them up, then you're able to kind of navigate your internal environment, so holding a crystal or sitting with the things that you've been taught. So I want to let you know that there are going to be mini retreats coming up in the very near future. I usually put them in the show notes, but if you follow me at Ryan Bean Yoga, you'll see more about them. I've been working a lot with doing more with cold immersion through the Wim Hof method, and I'll be doing some retreats of that. Actually, as soon as I get back, I'm actually going to Poland in January, so next month. To spend a week in Poland studying Wim Hof method stuff for my mastery program, and then I'll be coming back and doing many breathwork courses and cold immersion stuff, classes and retreats. In addition, I'm doing a lot of work with plant medicine and additionally with ketamine. And I think we're going to be planning another retreat. I just finished one last weekend here in southern Utah, and we're going to be offering another one in March. So just keep an eye out for that. I'll as soon as we confirm the date, I'll have that also in the show notes and on my Instagram so that you can sign up for that. Super transformational weekends of guided facilitation. We include getting into the river or the little spring there that's kind of into a pond, but it's definitely an ice bath. We had to shatter the ice to get in it last weekend. We had to cut it open and get in there, and we did a lot of yoga and breath work. I did this with my friends at Satori Health and Wellness, and we had Scott Allen on the podcast several episodes ago. If you're interested in hearing more about ketamine-assisted therapy and how that works out, made a lot of new friends at the retreat too. Some work we're going to be doing with MDMA and psilocybin. And anyway, just it's super exciting, transformational stuff that really just grateful that I'm having the opportunity to receive, not just as a we'll call it as a patient, but as a practitioner, but also as an instructor, being able to utilize these tools just like we've been using, sage and crystals and different techniques as tools. Well, now we're using these plants as tools. So look for those coming up in the very, very near future. In addition, I am offering a breathwork course on Insight Timer starting February the 4th. So if you're at all interested in that, I will also put that in the show notes. You can sign up through Insight Timer, that meditation app, that beautiful, amazing meditation app, and you can join me for 6 weeks. That's a 12-hour breathwork program. Anyway, I'm just really excited about that. It's Breathe to Manifest Miracles. We talk about manifestation techniques and creating intentional spaces, and then, of course, breath work. So I think I have some other announcements, but I'll put them in later. And a lot of stuff happening around in my world, and I think that's really about, for me, it's at least about letting it flow and kind of having acceptance of all the hard times and the good times, and letting things flow so that is waiting for me can be received. And I want to start today's episode off with a quote from Jeff Foster. And I know he wrote some books about acceptance, and I think his book is called Deepest Acceptance, I believe. I like a lot of his quotes that he puts out there on his social media. But this one says, "Why does it often take extreme life situations to bring back an awareness of the magic and mystery of life? Why do we often wait until we're about to die before discovering a deep gratitude for life as it is? Why do we exhaust ourselves seeking love, acceptance, fame, success, or spiritual enlightenment in the future? Why do we work or meditate ourselves into the grave? Why do we postpone life? Why do we hold back from it? What are we looking for exactly? What are we waiting for? What are we afraid of? Will the life we long for really come in the future, or is it always closer than that?" And I guess that's the real question is it closer than that? And we'll go on to kind of talk about that. But is the life that you've been waiting for closer than all this work and this holding back and this emotions and these ins and outs and all these different things that are happening in our lives? Do we need to navigate those, or can we simply maybe take a pause? And that's what we're going to explore today on Life as an Observer. I'm wrote the post, and if you haven't seen it, I'm just going to kind of read parts of it to you. But I wrote a post maybe earlier last week, and I wrote something that said, "You may think that riches will bring you happiness, and you may think that more followers will bring you deeper connections, maybe a more expansive network. But what you're really longing for is a deep intimacy with your own experience in your life. The deepest acceptance of every thought, every acceptance of every sensation, the deepest acceptance of every feeling, even the ones that don't feel good." And I would hint, even, especially the ones that don't feel good, "that cannot come from outside of yourself. I looked for more friends and watched them not stand by me when I was learning my way in this world. I watched connections come and go, and I have lived through betrayal, and I've sat in my own shame of who I was on my path to awakening. You must look within and accept that you are divinity and you are shadow. You are light and darkness interwoven in the beautiful, amazing, horrific, beautiful, and sometimes hostile world. I'm so happy we're on this journey together. That's really going into deepest acceptance, saying, I'm okay with it being really horrible, and I'm okay with it being really great, and I'm okay with it just being the way it is. So what does that mean to accept? And so I'm going to kind of break this down into 3 things that are acceptance, or what we're accepting, what's preventing us, and then, of course, how to move forward. Acceptance of thoughts. Well, this is, first of all, the Maya, the yogis call this the illusion of the self, is accepting that you have a narrative, that you believe you are a certain role in this life, that you believe your gender, that you are your role at home, you believe your role at work, you believe in all these different things. This is who I am, and this is what I wear, this is the time I wake up. This is like that acceptance of these thoughts. Now, keep in mind that our thoughts, most of them are repeating from the day before. So most of this illusion comes from a previous image and a previous image and a previous image that is all stemming from usually, like what Jeff Foster talked about, is that, had this traumatic event or something that's happening, and we live in that as our Maya, as our illusion. And that illusion of self becomes our thoughts. So our thoughts are, I am this thing that happened. I am this trauma. I am this because that happened to me. So this is why I act or feel this certain way. So we need to accept that those thoughts are going to come in. Doesn't mean we need to change them at all. I'm going to talk about Tara Brach here in a little bit, but she has a meditation called Rain that I've taught a few times that I really, really love. And it really emphasizes that acceptance, that just being aware of what's happening and allowing it to happen as part of that process. So another thing that we must accept is the expectations that we set and that others set upon us. You cannot accomplish everything that everyone wants of you and everything that you want of yourself and still keep that sense of calm and that sense of being an observer. You tend to be a follower at that point and just getting things done. And sometimes there's a lot of us that when we are running around in expectation, we feel quite productive. I'm getting this done and I'm getting this done. I use a day planner myself and I check things off the list as they come in, and it's wonderful and great and it feels really good to check things off your list. But what are we doing to our mind when we set ourselves into that conditioning that we must accomplish to feel fulfilled, that we are not okay if we do nothing? And listen, friends, I'm coming off of a day of doing nothing but self-work, maybe even a full weekend. We'll just be real. Like, it really started Friday and then went into yesterday and today, even though I've taught a few courses online and I've done a few other things, but I don't have an expectation of what I need to get accomplished. Part of me wants to get out there and do it and get all the holiday stuff done and, do some laundry and knock some things out of the park, doing, different tasks because I have them written in my planner. But that's just simply expectation of myself. Whereas what actually feels good right now is to do a lot of nothing, just, talking to you and sitting patiently. And sometimes we're going to go into it a little bit more, but sometimes that's the best way to remove reactions and to get away from the sensations that you feel in your body that tell you more and more and more is better. When we take a pause, you find that we can better witness and kind of get out of our expectations of what we think life is supposed to be to where we can really get to where we can receive it. Now, the final acceptance area, I suppose, acceptance of our thoughts, but as also this difference between perspective and truth. And I've talked about this on the podcast probably several times, but what we believe is not necessarily the truth, and what others believe is not necessarily the truth. And there is this line, not a really definitive line, but one that exists nonetheless, that is perspective. And then there's truth. And most things that I think of as truth come along the ways of, within the definition of laws of the universe. So we know that there's truth in, that there maybe is a sun, that it's warm, but what we feel is perspective. I feel warmth on my skin, whereas someone may not feel that. They feel the cold of the wind. And another perspective is that has to do with what we see. We could see clouds and say, it's not a very good day. It's very cloudy. Or we could be like others who love the clouds and go, today is such a great day because there's clouds for me to look at. Again, that's all perspective. And it's accepting our thoughts, whatever they lead us to, and saying, okay, is this perspective or truth? And this is a really great activity as we go into kind of what we can do to move into acceptance. It's really just sitting back with those thoughts that come in from the neocortex, from your thinking mind, your analytical self, and saying, is this perspective or is this truth? Okay, now we've talked about acceptance of thoughts. Let's talk about acceptance of sensations. So we have something in our body, I talk about a lot of this in breath work, is we have this bottom-up regulation and this top-down regulation. So we have sensations in our bodies, and some of those come from, hey, I'm in pain, and so the mind goes, you're in pain, okay, so we need to breathe through that discomfort, and that is a bottom-up sensory and then a top-down regulation. And it can happen the opposite way too, where the mind sees something, where your eyes see something, and it tells it to the mind, I believe that's a bear over there. What should I do? So that top-down regulation says we need to prepare for fight or flight. And so then you start to get this cortisol and adrenaline going through your body, and you then react. Well, you come to find out that it was simply just, maybe a small animal that was running around in the bushes. It could have been lizard. I know when I lived in Florida, the lizards are everywhere, and what the heck is that in the branches there? What is that in the leaves? And it was just a small little lizard making all kinds of noise. Again, that was perspective versus our truth. But this is acceptance of the sensations that we feel. So as I feel that fight or flight response, or as I feel the need to run or hide or divert or distract, it is to sit with them and saying, what am I feeling here? Not what am I thinking? What am I feeling? Am I feeling discomfort? Am I feeling pain? Or am I feeling suffering? And most of the time, that expectation of what we think it is just a perspective which has led us down a road of suffering. But when we really go into truth, we tend to find out that acceptance is really the pacifier. It is the comfort. It is the ease. Taking time to accept the sensations that you feel in the body, not as truth, but sometimes as just little messages coming from within, reminding you of your humanness and reminding you of your ability to persevere. Acceptance of all things. Now, that's a really hard one, right? All things that are contrasting and things that are beautiful. So how do we accept things that are uncomfortable? We talked about it a little bit, just sitting with it, but what about the one that comes to my mind right away is getting into an ice bath, right? Most people say, well, I would do it, but it's really cold, right? Well, sure, it is, but it's supposed to be. And that hormetic stressor that happens and the inflammation decreaser and a lot of stuff that happens, but getting away from the benefits, just sitting with the acceptance of, is this pain, is this discomfort, or is this suffering? I had one of my teachers in India said to me, that when we control our breath, we control our mind, and when we control our mind, we can control our bodies. And so it sort of starts with the breath, but to do that, we need to slow down and pause. We need to slow down and pause and find out that the transformation is in that moment, not in the last one or not in our future thinking that says, that's going to be cold. How about, how do I feel right now? I'm feeling a little anxious. I'm feeling a little stressed. Awesome. I'm going to accept that that is part of this process and move forward. Moving into willpower. See, we have to accept all parts as part of the journey. I think we talk about it all the time about how that is really truly living when we can begin to notice and really appreciate that we are, the treasure is part of our journey, right? As part of that. So acceptance of all things, not just the ones that feel good, but acceptance of the things that don't feel so good also. So what is preventing this from happening? We talked about acceptance of our thoughts, acceptance of the sensations, and acceptance of the contrast. Well, what's preventing this from happening is in this personal intimacy. Well, we get caught up. All right, we get caught up, friends. We get caught up into things like the news. How many of you know someone who always has the news on and expecting the worst, and they turn on to see maybe something simple like what's the weather going to be, but then they turn, you get a news story of something that you would never even have had a concern about, but yet now it's consuming your day. You're concerned about a bacteria, a virus. You're concerned about a stock market crash. You're concerned about things that you have no control over. The same happens in social media, even more amplified. We're looking for the gratification of acceptance from others by our likes and by our comments, but yet the acceptance really comes from within. We have this expectation that we need to be a certain way, or we need to have so many likes for our message to be a good one, which is not true. When I first started making this podcast, I had nothing. I really didn't know what I was doing. Let's just be honest about it, and just was being called to do something to get the message out. And some of the podcasts get listens to, some of them get shared, some of them get comments. Some people are patrons. There's lots of positive feedback, but then there's also the negative stuff that we don't always talk about, right? We don't want to talk about it. And we tend to do that with our social media also, where we only show our celebrations. We only show our victories. We only show the things that we accomplished, but yet we didn't show all the times we fell working on the handstand, right? So maybe that's something to sit back and saying, what's preventing us from this deep intimacy with ourselves is that we're only celebrating the wins, not celebrating the journey. Who isn't dissatisfied with at least one part of their life, really? Maybe you wish you had a better body, a better workout, a better eating habit, and perhaps you dislike your inability to resist temptations and things, which, that could be your social media. That's a temptation. Often we dwell on our faults and we beat ourselves up because we aren't perfect, okay? But it doesn't have to be like this all the time. In applying acceptance to your life, you can learn to judge yourself a little less harshly, and as a result, you become happier, calmer, and more well-rounded. I want to talk a little bit about how we begin to accept everything. So we talked about the thoughts and the sensations and the contrast and what's preventing us, but how do we really truly incorporate that into our lives? Well, have you ever had a dream where you're trying to do something like, climb a big mountain or swim a large ocean, and no matter what happens, you just can't move, and you're working hard, and you just feel like you're going nowhere? It seems like a nightmare, right? Well, these dreams are thought to signify that deep down, that your insides feel a little inadequate. That is though you're doomed to fail forever. And so we wake up and sweat, what is going on? It's no surprise that when we feel this way, in fact, we often move through our lives the same way, preoccupied with the stuff of the world, flailing around, gathering, fixated on narrow goals and things that elude us. And we just consider about how many of us go through our lives totally fixated on our efforts to go somewhere, achieve something, do something. But even when we're engaged in these, some of them enjoyable activities like talking to our friends or doing a game or, whatever that is, we're simultaneously replaying our concerns about our future instead of occupying that moment, what we're thinking about, the game or the activity. And we tend to not be in that moment where we think about our future or we think about what we can say next that's clever or how we can one up those. It's a very interesting to watch humans justify who they think they are. And Ram Dass talks a lot about this. Like he says, I'll believe who you think you are if you believe who I think I am in this dance. He calls it the dance or the divine dance of Leela. There was a story that Tara Brach had talked about in her book Radical Acceptance. And she talked about, I believe this was in the 1970s, there was a tiger named Mohini who lived in the zoo in D.C. And after being in that small cage for years and years, Mohini was transferred to this enclosure space, lots of running area and a pond and trees, and there was all kinds of stuff. And they thought we just did a really good thing bringing Mohini into this massive enclosure. But despite that freedom that was offered, Mohini's mind kept her trapped in her old patterns of behavior, and she began to kind of pace and maybe listen to that inner voice, that inner critic that says, I've only been living in this small space for so long. So, and began to wear around the grass, just kind of pacing, wearing away in this small corner of her enclosure, which was the space of her old cage. And I don't remember how long Mohini was in that old cage, but long enough to create a pattern that she was unable to break from. And just like Mohini, sometimes we don't free ourselves, but we can. The key to unlocking the cage is accept everything about our inner and outer selves. In order to do this, we must be aware of what's occurring in our bodies and our minds, of course, without attempting to judge or control or resist the thoughts or feelings. Fostering this awareness and considering all of your thoughts, feelings, and sensations with an open and kind heart means that you'll be practicing something called acceptance. Now, you may have unwelcome thoughts all the time, and you may be finding yourself like Mohini where you feel sort of trapped. But acceptance silences that negative inner voice that's saying that I'm trapped and enables this self-acceptance and allows for freedom to occur. Well, how do we get there? Sometimes we got to take a pause, right? We don't just have somebody operating these levers in our mind. We have to take a pause. So when you're dealing with something that's hard, maybe you've witnessed something or you've been involved in something, whatever that case is, we can't control the pain that comes from those situations, but we can manage them. So if someone hurts you or lashes out or whatever, maybe they want to cut you out of their life or whatever that is, you may find an appropriate reaction, meaning I'll re-lash out. No, I'll cut you off. No, I'll tell you what's wrong or what's right. But responding like this will really make you feel worse, not any better. Why? Because when trying to escape a particular experience, it means we're rejecting that experience as though it's not valid, right? And this is problematic because our personal experiences are an important part of what makes us who we are. So we have to accept, not reject, an experience, even if it's painful. Because if we do, we're rejecting part of ourselves, and we're telling ourselves that we're above that or better than that. Accept it and say, that's fine. But the more we try to change these uncontrollable situations, the more we feed our inadequacy. So the better approach is, when faced with this troubling situation, these feelings, this argument, whatever that is for you, the best way is to take a moment and pause. Just by pausing, just take a second. The chance to recognize and observe your emotional and inner experience, your inner turbulence, your inner thoughts. You may feel as though there are certain things that are controlling you, whether it be getting on your favorite social media site, or whether that be to eat something rather than exercise. I don't know what it is for you, but just by pausing for a moment, and you can break down your thoughts clearly. We can see what desires, fears, and all these things that are motivating you and distracting you are coming up. After that pause, regardless of whatever you choose to do, you'll be able to make a more conscious choice rather than a reactive choice. So we have to be kind. In these distressing situations, we tend to panic because that's kind of built into our DNA, right? That fight or flight mechanism. And if this feels really familiar to you, then listen to this next part. One of the biggest fears of our civilization of humans is public speaking. And those who are learning to speak, who are having a hard time with it, they'll get in front of stages, and you can notice when someone is not comfortable speaking. They may be stuttering, or they may be using their words differently, or they could be fidgeting. You can see it in their body language. And sometimes by us noticing that we're fidgety, nervous, that we're in that fight or flight mode, and even admitting it to ourselves, which is really a form of vulnerability, saying, I'm nervous. This is uncomfortable. What you're doing is you're facing your fear. You're facing what could be a negative experience, and gaining the courage to express what you're feeling. This might be in your body. You might be sweating. Your heart might be racing. And this is a bottom-up signal to your brain saying, you got to be afraid, right? Well, the brain gets the choice here to say, well, no, body. Thank you for the input. However, I don't really feel that way. By naming your fear, it's kind of like the story of the Buddha and Mara, where it just says, hi, Mara, I see you trying to distract me from my meditation. Come, let's have tea. By taking away that power, just by identifying what is happening, it puts you back in the driver's seat. It puts you back in control. Just saying, hi, I feel stressed. Hi, I feel nervous. My body is giving me these sensations, which I know that I'm confident here, but this is what I'm feeling, is a very beautiful lesson in exploring vulnerability. When you recognize your emotions at any given moment and greet them with this friendliness, you are practicing acceptance. In this state, you can pay very careful attention to your feelings, allowing yourself to accept them, instead of making them into the enemy, maybe cursing at yourself. Why am I so nervous? I have all these people expecting me to give a lecture. Or I know my content, but I'm nervous, and now I'm letting everyone down. Well, this aspect of acceptance is crucial because it helps us increase our self-compassion, just loving yourself more. Most of us are only friendly towards ourselves when we're succeeding, right? So as soon as we fail at something, we're so quick to just rush in, judge ourselves, reject the parts of us that are not perfect, that are not succeeding. But in this moment, it's a really good place for you to just say, hey, how would I treat my friend, or how would I treat my sibling if they were feeling this way? It can be difficult, but try to extend this to yourself, the same compassion that you would want extended to you from someone else. So like we said, you'll start to feel this in your body when you're having these uncomfortable situations. And rather of being out of touch of your body, focus on what you're feeling. So when someone lets you down, or you know, it's easy to get really upset, saying, you did this to me. But when your first impulse is to get angry, maybe take a second approach, just noticing that you're getting angry before storming around and cussing, swearing, throwing, whatever it is that you could do to react. Focus on the physical sensations that are in your body. So you can feel that building up, and you can feel this almost like a volcano, right? We're getting ready to explode, and you can feel yourself calming down when you just take that moment. Instead of concentrating on how furious you are, rushing in to confront someone, to be the right one, to be stronger, to be confident, right? Focus on how that anger or that feeling is manifesting itself in your body. And you might feel your blood boiling, your face is hot, you may even feel a headache coming on. But as soon as you begin to become aware of your body, there is like this really beautiful tenderness that comes in where you start saying, thank you, body, for noticing that I was feeling that way and giving me the opportunity to just take a breath and slow down. When you realize that your whole body is tightening, your chest feels tight, and you feel like you're about to explode, and taking that breath, you become more attuned on how you're feeling and more empathetic to maybe the other person too, to finding the right things to say or having a conversation rather than shouting and accusing. Remember this connection to your body. Remember I talked about when you control the breath, you can control the mind, and when you can control the mind, you can control the body. But sometimes the body just does its own thing. So to get it back, we have to go back into breath, mind, and then body. This will help you to make better decisions. Unfortunately, most of us are way out of touch from our bodies, and to that extent, we're way out of touch with our minds. So we don't really pay much attention to those physical sensations in every moment. We just kind of move through them. And okay, there it is. I'm moving on. I'll be okay. But see, both positive sensations like hugging someone or working out or whatever it is, and negative ones like we've described, can offer this beautiful sense of aliveness and this connectedness to ourselves. Even the feeling of the rain on your face can awaken your senses to let your focus on the experience begin to manifest and show itself. Focusing on the rain, we could say, oh, it's horrible that it's raining, or we could simply dance in the rain. Now, we cause ourselves a lot of suffering, don't we? And I'm trying to get us into how do we move a little deeper into this acceptance. So sometimes it's hard to love ourselves. Sometimes we're just really, really critical, and we criticize everything that goes wrong, and we talk about how this reminds us of our failed relationships and the way we can't hold a job or whatever that is, you know. And this in turn keeps us away from meditating. I have it all the time in my yoga practices where people say, well, that's great. I just want to move. I can't really do the meditation part. And that's because we're sitting with those intrusive thoughts and that really hard self-criticism. And the reason we behave like this is to protect ourselves from suffering. So we just let our mind wander. That way we don't have to sit with who we truly are. So how does this defense mechanism work? Well, instead of allowing ourselves to suffer and suffer feelings of vulnerability, jealousy, fear, whatever, we cover up these emotions with this self-judgment. We push them away, fearing that our vulnerability or jealousy might lead to other things, such as neediness or self-indulgence or all kinds of different things. So we sit there and judge ourselves as we lay there trying to meditate, but unfortunately rejecting suffering doesn't help. In fact, it's only through learning that we can experience suffering, experience it instead of pushing it away and judging it. It's really only by accepting and having compassion for our own suffering that we can discover our innermost nature. Now, Buddhism offers like a really positive approach on this. In fact, it's important to Buddhist teachings to saying that suffering is a gateway to compassion, or suffering is grace. We hear that all the time. And being compassionate, we're expressing the deepest parts of ourselves. Suffering is grace. What can we learn from this experience? So as you're laying there trying to meditate and wondering, how the heck do I do this? I'm not even familiar with this process. This is horrible. I have to sit here with these thoughts. When is it going to be over? Well, that's your lesson right there. Sit in grace. Hey, I see you. The thought's wandering. I see it jumping over here. Let me take a breath. I'm back. Now the thoughts are wandering again. And then we reel them back in. And we're not hard on ourselves. We are kind and we explore vulnerability and we start to feel around in our body, what's happening in my knees and my feet. And we just come back. We just keep coming back. And not being angry with ourselves because having to come back all the time. We start to heal in that way. We start to grow stronger. And heal maybe is not the best word, but we begin to gain some resilience towards our process. And in the end, able to alleviate this pain or suffering that may be happening because we can't sit with our thoughts through our own self-compassion. So only by accepting ourselves for who we are and acknowledging our most painful discomfort, our suffered experiences, can we truly begin to love ourselves. But once we establish self-acceptance, we can begin to heal the parts of ourselves that are hurting and find an amazing bit of inner peace. Amazing bit of inner peace. So to summarize, we have this deep intimacy that's waiting for us within ourselves. We express it a lot to others, but it's waiting for us to express it to ourselves, this acceptance of our thoughts, navigating the illusion of ourselves, and also the expectations that we have of ourselves, honoring that there is perspective and that there is truth. We accept all the sensations, from the bottom up, from our body into our mind, and from our mind down to our body, witnessing them all, accepting things that are hard, especially those that are hard, and recognizing when there are things that are preventing us from evolving, like the news and the social media and maybe societal expectations and maybe even our gender expectations and our roles at home expectations, and just kind of superseding that by beginning to just accept that that is part of our life, but not all of our life. So we begin to accept who we are and finding this acceptance through not dwelling on our thoughts, not dwelling on our faults, and taking pauses where we need to. As we feel that bottom-up sensations coming in, we can take those moments to deeply explore ourselves and go into self-compassion and vulnerability. By exploring this vulnerability, we learn what are some of the things that we have hidden, some of the traumas and some of the stresses that we bury really deep that are causing us to act this way. We can focus on these sensations in the body and in the mind and realize that the suffering that we're putting on ourselves is really grace from the universe. This is us moving into a place where we can learn and where we are free. From these experiences, we begin to truly love ourselves and find our greatest inner peace. Hopefully this helps you navigate and find acceptance in the things that you have challenges with. It doesn't come overnight. It doesn't happen with just flipping the switch and looking at your notes and going, pause, breathe. But that is a really good first step. When you feel sensations come in, pause, breathe. This is mindfulness in action. This is the inner yogi coming out. This is you moving out of your thinking mind and moving into that heart awareness, this place of compassion for yourself, and in turn for those all around you. Really grateful you joined today to talk about self-acceptance and this deep intimacy with ourself and our own life experience. Look forward to talking to you on a future episode of Life as an Observer. If you're interested in more content like this, certainly follow me on Ryan Bean Yoga on the social media channels. Please share this podcast with others who you think are maybe having a hard time around this holiday season. Invite them to participate in meditations that I lead. And if you're listening to me on any of the podcast sites, your reviews are really, really helpful. Really, really helpful. If you take a moment to review this podcast with 5 stars, maybe make a comment about accepting yourself or loving yourself more this holiday season. I'd love to read those. I look forward to chatting with you maybe after the holidays. I think this will be the last one before we move into the holidays, as we're in almost December the 20th tomorrow. So I look forward to chatting with you maybe after the holidays as we set some goals for the new year. Namaste, my friends.